Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you ever so much for joining us this morning. We're going to be talking a little bit about how to embrace pivotal moments in your business and indeed in your life. And we've got some fantastic speakers with us today. So at 5 past, I have the pleasure of interviewing the IMDb founder, Cole Needham. And he has had a phenomenal career, and I don't want to talk too much about it, as hopefully Cole will be doing that for us. Afterwards, we're joined by 4 entrepreneurs and founders who are going to do a handful of pivotal moments in their careers. And then we're going to speak with Margaret Heffernan, the author and serial entrepreneur, who's going to give her words of wisdom. So we've got another couple of minutes before we're going to kick all of that off. But whilst we wait, I just want to say a big thank you to all the supporters of Bath Digital Festival for this year. As a number of you will be aware by the fact that you're not sat in some hotel or pub or similar in and around Bath. The entire festival is digital this year, and it's the first year that we have attempted as a festival organising team to run an entirely virtual festival. It's a very exciting, if not bumpy road. I know that yesterday there were a few technical hitches. Hopefully there aren't today, but if there is anything, you can reach out to us. For those of you who are in the Zoom app, you can use the chat facilities. If you are watching through the website, I believe you'd have to pop something in the Q&A if you need to get hold of us. So all of the supporters who've come on board this year to help with the Bath Digital Festival have done so within the last couple of months to make sure that we can, at one of the most pivotal moments in the history of the festival and of the city indeed. So I'm hoping that basically a huge thanks to all of those. I'm just going to pick up on the Q&A. So Nigel says, I can't see the chat option, by the way. Nigel, if you are in the app itself, I was led to believe you can see the chat. If not, then obviously use the Q&A as you have. If you're watching through the website, it's definitely the Q&A. So that's just due to the way that the lovely people at Zoom allow us to do certain things in the app, but not everything in the website. So excellent. Right. We are due to speak to Cole in just a moment, and I can see we've got around 40 or so of our participants in and ready to go. So we will kick off in a moment. So first of all, I want to say a huge welcome in a moment. Cole Needham will be appearing on your screen, and I will say a big welcome to Cole. But before I do, my name is David Kelly. I'm representing Storm Consultancy. We're hosting this organisational event today, and also the festival as one of the founding team. So thank you very much indeed for joining us. And without further ado, we're going to have our first technical test of the morning, which is me attempting to bring Cole up onto the screen. So I'm going to go and ask Cole now to both unmute himself and appear on our screen, and then we should be able to get started. So here we go. Cole,
hello,
good
David.
morning. It is lovely to
Hey.
see you. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I want to start by congratulating, I suppose, you and IMDb on your 30th birthday.
Thank you. That was Saturday. Yeah, so the timing of this was absolutely perfect. So thank you very much.
No problem at all. And I hear that you joined us today, obviously here at Bath Digital Festival, but yesterday you were doing the One show at the BBC?
Yes, that is right. Yeah, and it's available on the BBC iPlayer for 28 days.
Super, thank you, Cole. Right, so I'm going to dive in because I know we've got you for 15 minutes and we want to use it.
Okay.
Can I start at the very beginning then? Some of the pivotal things, I suppose, for you, but where did your love of movies start and where did it come from?
Right, okay. I need to take you all the way back to 1972. I was 5 years old. I was staying with my grandmother, and she said to me, would you like to enter a colouring competition? And I don't know if little 5-year-old me even understood what a colouring competition was, but she showed me the local newspaper. There was a scene from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and I diligently coloured between all the lines to make what looked like to 5-year-old eyes, looked like a nice picture. Lo and behold, I won. And the prize was 2 tickets to go see Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs at the Manchester Odeon. So I fell in love with cinema, and from that point onwards, all I wanted to do was see movies. Yeah, so that's the little beginning.
Super. And so presumably from that little beginning, at some point you thought, do you know what? I should start, documenting and rating all of the films and things you see. So where did that, where did that jump come from? Was it a passion that you turned digital, or was it something you spotted an opportunity for?
Oh, way before anything did. Well, kind of way before anything digital. So take you forwards to 1981, the height of the home video revolution in the UK, VHS tapes everywhere. So I was 14 years old. A couple of years earlier, I've got a little prop that's worth showing here. A couple of years earlier, I had got my first home computer, December 1979. This computer had 128 bytes of memory. So I had this interest in technology, and VHS tapes were kind of landing on me from all over the place. And so I started to lose track of what I'd seen and what I hadn't seen. So the classic thing to do is buy a paper diary and I start to write down everything that I saw. And in fact, this is my diary from 1990. So as I say, I started this in 81, but from 1990, this is this week. From 1990. That's how my diary was in 1981. But I'd only been doing it for a couple of weeks, and by this time I had upgraded to a bigger computer. Look at that, Sharp MZ80K with 48K of memory and a screen. And so at 2 weeks, I was kind of like, I'd love to record more about what I'm seeing. So I created a database on this computer, and I used to rewind the VHS tapes, press the pause button, and diligently type the credits in. So just for my own use, ridiculously geeky, but it kind of turned out all right in the end. So that got me. That's how I began to track everything. And I'm now at over 12,700 films that I've seen since. I backdated the diary once I got it electronically. I backdated it to the 1st of Jan 1980. So in the last 40 years, 12,700 films, and that doesn't include rewatches.
I was just attempting there, Cole, to do a little bit of maths, and an average of a 120-minute movie, that is, what, 1.52 million minutes, I think, of movie time, excluding those reruns that you just talked about.
Yeah. I don't dare do that calculation. On average, I watch 2 per day. Still,
and frankly, it's I'm just glad that you've managed to get to the point where you're no longer manually typing the credits in. So
yes.
That sounds like it was a colossal amount of effort, but as you say, it's worked out well. And so from that personal use only computer, I mean, I just don't know how big the hard drive was, but it strikes me that on one of those you'd have run out quite shortly. But
it didn't have a hard drive. It had a cassette tape.
Good Lord, yeah, okay, fair enough. I was going to say, unfortunately, in my youth, we started with floppy disks. I wasn't around before those, so and I remember the days of having to split a file onto 2 floppy disks or more. So there you go. It's probably halfway down your career. So at what point did IMDb transfer for that personal use thing and become what either became IMDb but was accessible to others on the internet?
Right. So I was in a Usenet news group, text-based discussion group, pre-web. So this is kind of like late 1980s into 1990. In the group, people would always ask, "Oh, what else has that person done? What else did she direct? What else did they write?" That kind of thing. And so I found myself kind of using my own database to answer that question. And to cut a very long story short, on the 17th of October 1990, I published the very first version of the IMDb software that could be downloaded onto any computer connected to the internet back in those days. Remember, no websites. So you downloaded it all, command line interface. We started with cast and directors. But within 2 weeks, in fact, somebody mailed me and said, "Oh, this database is great. I'm a big fan of writers. Have you thought of adding writers to the database?" And so I was kind of like, "Oh, this would be really handy," but I'm a bit busy on the things that I'm doing because I was managing the actors and another one of the other sections and writing the software. So, so I wrote back and I said, "Well, I can give you the writers from my own database. I can give you some software to manage the information, manage submissions, publish it back out, and I'll add support to the software for writers." And so they agreed, and so we added writers. And so over the next few years, we just recruited volunteer after volunteer, all spread throughout the world. We never met. There's no Zoom. There's no, in fact, actually, international phone calls were a fortune. So all done by email. 1993 came along, and I got an email from a guy at Cardiff University, a guy called Rob Harter. And Rob's email went something like this: "Hey, Col, just installed the movie database software. Think it's really good, but have you heard of this World Wide Web thing? Because I think it might be quite big. Would love to write a wrapper around the software to have a website." And so I said yes. I had heard of the World Wide Web. Sounded like a good idea. It was a new way to get the IMDb information out to people throughout the world. So we launched in the summer of '93. Again, only on Cardiff University. No advertising. We're not even incorporated or anything like that. We're just a bunch of volunteers. We were about in the first 100 websites to launch, which is a little crazy. But then we were up and running. That then led to, I guess, we were still growing in terms of the content that we had, in terms of the type of content that we had, and so by '95, the traffic was doubling every 2 weeks. And this little hobby could no longer be something that you could kind of do like part-time. So we were faced with this decision: what should we do? We could close it down because that was an option, because it was getting too big to do, or we could incorporate and see if we could sell some advertising. Now, I know you're thinking, really, 5 years online, and you didn't think that you didn't think there was maybe an opportunity here. At the time we were having these discussions, you could count the number of websites that were ad supported on 2 hands, and you didn't know if they were making any money, if they were going to last, or anything like that. But we took the decision. We bought our first web server on a credit card. 2 weeks later, so this was in '96 by now. 2 weeks later, I was on the phone to our first potential advertiser. They'd never bought any advertising before. I'd never sold any advertising before. But so they're like, "Well, so how much is it for a month?" A month? Kind of thing. I made up a number which was 3 times what we owed on the credit card, so we could pay off the credit card before it was due. And kind of slightly romanticizing this a little bit, we became the world's first profitable internet company. I'm
That's
sure we're
fantastic.
not really, but you know, so that, and the summer of '96, that was my kind of like cue to give up my day job. And from that point onwards, we were converting our volunteers into paid team members. So that's how it was humming along then.
Well, I mean, we've got a few minutes left, and I'm really keen to hear about kind of how Amazon came along at this point, because if you're in '96, well, Amazon was '98. So you've gone from in '96 having your credit card bill to '98 being bought by Amazon. So maybe give us a couple of minutes on that one.
Yeah, so we were not looking to be acquired. We were running a profitable, growing internet business. We did not need to be acquired. And December 97, I got an email from a guy who used to work for, at the time worked for Amazon, a guy called Alan Kaplan. His job title was General Counsel, Amazon.com. And his email went pretty much like this. Hi, Cole. Jeff Bezos and I were discussing movie websites the other day. Naturally, IMDb came up in the conversation. Jeff and I are going to be in the UK in January. We'd love to meet to discuss some business ideas. Now, I know for anyone who's watching this, if you got an email like that today, you would, even before you've replied, you would be breaking out the exit champagne. You would be like booking a test drive at your local Tesla dealership. You would be like imagining like what possibilities are ahead of you, kind of thing. But at the time, Amazon was only a bookseller. I'd never acquired anybody before, and had only been a publicly traded company for 7 months. So we went along for this meeting with Jeff. Jeff explained how Amazon was going from selling books to music to video, VHS and DVDs, and would love to talk about possible business arrangements, how we could help them with the video store. And that ranged from a straight content licensing deal all the way through to an outright acquisition. And Jeff had such a clear picture of how all of this would fit together with IMDb, where the information's optimized for browsing, discovery, contribution. Amazon would build a great video store experience. And so we found ourselves like pretty much agreeing in principle on the day. Like a trip to Seattle, plenty of legal paperwork backwards and forwards. And on the 24th of April, 1998, IMDb became Amazon's first ever acquisition. They acquired 3 companies on that day. So we all claimed to be the first.
Amazing. So Cole, in our last kind of 30 seconds or so together, can I don't know if this is going to be a fair question, but across your business career so far, does one moment stick out as the pivotal moment that changed everything?
Outside of the acquisition by Amazon, so I'll take you back to the I guess the summer of '96, just before I quit my day job. And my wife and I, we had 2 kids. They were 3 years old at the time, and we had to decide whether I was going to quit my day job and go all in, or whether we were just kind of like back away kind of thing. And we went to the Showcase Cinema in St. Philip's Causeway. We went to see Mission Impossible. And on the screen, there is Tom Cruise with Netscape Navigator doing all kinds of things that you could not do with Netscape in 1996. And we'd arranged to have a pizza afterwards to have a discussion. So we went over to, I think it was Pizza Hut. And it was kind of like, well, hey, if Tom Cruise is on the internet, then I think this is going somewhere. And so it was a clear yes. Quit the day job and
so
go.
Tom Cruise was your pivotal moment. Super.
Yes.
Cole, a huge thank you very much for joining us. Our time's run out. It's been fantastic to have you with us, and hopefully we can pick up for maybe a longer conversation at the next Digital Festival.
All right, thanks, David, and thank you everyone for watching. Take care. Bye.
Huge thanks to Cole for joining us there. We're going to move swiftly along. We've got 4 entrepreneur founders coming up now. I'm going to let them introduce themselves as we go. They're going to talk us through a few pivotal moments. So first up, we've got Chris May from Maiden. So I'm going to ask him to start his video and unmute himself, and hopefully he will be on your screen any moment now. So Chris, do we have you?
Hopefully. There's my mug. I think we've
so Chris, I will let you kick off.
Okay,
please do begin if you wish to share your screen.
I will do, thank you. And I'm Chris May. I'm the founder director of Maiden, which is a digital healthcare company based in Bath. And this morning I've got 2 pivotal moments to share with you. If this all works perfectly, which it hopefully will. And hopefully you can see this. Okay, the first the first pivotal moment actually came in 2007. Maiden's actually just celebrated its 20th anniversary, so we've been going 20 years. And actually, what really made the company take off was something that happened 13 years ago. Up until that point, and if you look at this chart on the screen, you'll be able to see where that pivotal moment took place. Because this is a graph showing our turnover from our date of inception right through to 2019. And you can see that for the first sort of 9 or so years, we were sort of ticking over, growing quite slowly. Our turnover was about 200,000 in the first year. It was only reached about 500,000 by the time we got to 2009. And then suddenly it kind of took off, sort of not quite exponentially, but obviously on a much steeper curve. And this is something which is quite common in business, I understand, from those who know much more about business than I do. It's called a hockey stick curve. About 60% of businesses fail in the first 5 years, but those that actually do make it beyond that will hopefully kind of reach this point of inflection, which is called the hockey stick point, and that's certainly what happened to us. So what actually did happen? Well, up until 2007, we were operating like a typical web agency, which many of the tech companies in Bristol and Bath are. And what that means is that you're delivering projects over and over again for clients, and you win a project, you deliver a project, you get paid, and then you move on to the next project. And after a few years of doing that, it actually becomes a bit demoralizing, I found. And it was quite difficult getting to the start of a financial year and just having hit all of your targets, the clock gets reset, you're back down at zero, and having to kind of do the whole thing again, and probably if you're trying to grow, hit an even higher target the next year. And so we wanted to change that. So in 2007, we made the decision that we were going to try and get into a product development rather than turnaround projects. We were very fortunately ended up with a project, as it turned around, a turnaround project, which turned into a product, and which was in psychological therapies, a new program that had been launched by the NHS. We developed a patient management system for that, and that, to cut a long story short, took off, and the rest of the growth of the company has been really based around working in that area. And what that does, working in projects, and I don't mean to teach you to suck eggs, but it's a really magical thing. I do a new starters presentation for everybody who joins a company. And when I get to this slide that you see on the screen now, I always say, if you can remember anything about this presentation, please remember this slide here. And what this slide is a chart of our recurring revenue streams. So you can see that in 2009, we had no recurring revenue whatsoever because we were just doing turnaround projects. As we went into 2010, we took in some recurring revenue, which is a little grey element of the bar in 2010, and we added the orange bit, which was the recurring revenue we added into that year. That rolls over then, those two elements roll over into 2011, so that we get the grey bar is what we enter the year with, and then the orange is what we add to it in recurring revenue going forward. And you can see how that chart builds up. And what that means, of course, is that when you start your new financial year, suddenly you're not starting at zero anymore. You're starting at whatever the recurring revenue position is from the year before. And this is just magic. So we kind of try now and focus on recurring revenue and build that up. But it was all around that pivotal moment in 2007 when we really decided to focus on doing products rather than projects. The second pivotal moment is actually about how we go about this. And again, I've got another chart to demonstrate this, and you can again hopefully see where the pivotal moment was, which is around the sort of November 2016 in the middle of the chart there. What this is the results of our staff survey, which we were doing annually, and now we do it every 6 months. And each of the dots on the chart represents a question and the average score we get against that question. So there are 26 questions in total. We ask response in every single survey, and you have to give a rating between 0 and 4 for each of the questions. And you can see up to 2011, we were starting to go downhill a bit, and people were getting less satisfied with the way we were operating the company on a whole range of levels. And so we had to do something about that, and we did. And you can see that from that moment, we started to lift a lot of these things up, and we've had much better responses to our staff surveys ever since. So what happened there? Well, up until 2016, we were kind of operating pretty much as a typical company with a hierarchy that looks pretty similar to the one that you see on the screen there. And it was starting to sort of fall over. It just wasn't working. And as a company grew, because we were obviously growing quite fast in terms of staff numbers as the revenue increased, it was all starting to get a bit messy, and we decided that we needed to do something about this. One of the problems is being able to see what the problems were. And this chart from Corporate Rebels kind of is based on real data, and it kind of gives you a view as within a hierarchical organization of just how much information and knowledge there is about what is really going on in an organization. So we decided to change this and create a sort of whole different ethos of working based around self-managing teams and a flat structure. So today, this is kind of representation of pretty much what we look like. All of the teams that you see on the chart there, there is a dot per person, are all self-managing, and they kind of work together. So even the directors have a role, and they sit within this structure playing the role that the directors play. And the teams work autonomously to a greater extent, although they do trade with each other. And then we have some overarching groups, which you can see at the bottom there, which look at different aspects of the company, like strategy or improvement, or our way of working, which is a constant movable feast. It's a work in progress. And people from all of the teams are invited to kind of join these groups. And actually that's developed even further now over the 4 years that we've been developing this program. And we, oh, that's me there. And we now have this representation of our organisation, which was done by one of our student interns, which we're actually now kind of building up. And we do think of ourselves as operating more like a village than a typical company structure, which actually has lots of facets to it, including, obviously can't go through the whole lot, and you won't be able to read it anyway, but you know, the welcome way bit is actually about induction and all of the different things that new recruits go through, and then you kind of get into the sort of main part of the village with all the aspects out there. So in a nutshell, those are probably the two biggest pivotal moments in our companies, changing what we did in 2007 and changing how we did it starting in 2016. Both are obviously still works in progress, but hopefully there'll be more positive pivotal moments to come.
Super, thank you ever so much for that, Chris. I'll let you end your screen share. Chris, we've got you for another 90 seconds or so, and I think the question I'd love to ask is, I know that I think it was 2016, 2017, you ventured a long way down south, all the way to Australia. So I'm wondering if there's anything you think that might be in the future or the near future in terms of pivotal moments coming up for Maiden. Are there any other global expansion?
I'd like to think so. So the psychological therapies program the NHS introduced in 2006 is when they announced it. It didn't actually get going until 2009. It's actually quite groundbreaking globally, and a lot of countries are looking at what we've been doing. And Australia was one of the first countries to do that. And so they launched a program based on the UK model, and we followed that by offering our software out there. So we are growing in Australia quite slowly, but other countries are also looking at it, and wherever they do, we'll be there with the software to support it, hopefully.
Super. Chris, huge thanks for joining us this morning. It's an absolute pleasure to hear about the history. I think there's a lot to take away, even for me personally. It's we're classic agency model, so I know what you mean about the numbers re-hitting and resetting to 0. But thank you very much indeed. I will now turn off your camera, Chris, and we shall move along. So thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, David.
Super. So we've heard from Chris. I think next up we have got Tom Carter, who is one of the founders of Ultraleap, which you may know previously as Ultra Haptics from Bristol. So I'm going to ask Tom to join us now and unmute and show his camera. So Tom, good morning. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Let me try and make this share. Cool. Okay. So good morning, everybody. I'm Tom. I'm the CTO and one of the co-founders of Ultraleap. We're a company based in Bristol, and we make technologies that enable you to interact with the future of computing. So 2 technologies. One is hand tracking that enables the computer to see what your hands are doing, builds up a 3D skeleton of the bones and joints in your hands like you see there. And the second is mid-air haptic feedback, which actually allows you to feel things in mid-air without touching anything. And I'm going to talk today about the journey of the company, sort of how we've evolved and some pivotal moments, and with a particular focus on communication and culture. So at the beginning, this is what our office looked like. This was us, the 3 of us sat in the pub, which was our office. And communicating, keeping in touch with each other was super easy. We were all sat there, you just talk to each other. Sort of a super simple approach, which means everybody knows what's going on. Then pivotal moment number 1, we opened an office out in California. So the majority of our customer base is on the West Coast. And the idea was that we'd open an office out there, grow a team, flying to America would go down, customer contact would go up. The second worked, the first did not work. We still fly just as much as before, but suddenly we've got this great team of very dynamic looking people based out in California. And California is a lovely place, but it's in a different time zone. It's not just in a different time zone, it's in a time zone that is far enough apart that it immediately made the Dolly Parton impossible. You cannot work 9 to 5 at Ultraleap once we have an office in California, because 9 a.m. in California is 5 p.m. in the UK. So realistically, we've only got these 3 hours of overlap each day in which we can actually jump on the phone and talk to each other. That in itself is not too bad when there's only 6 people out there, particularly focused on the commercial side of the business. But then we found this the hard way. As the company grows, the lines of communication, if you're going to talk to each other in order to spread information, they really don't scale that nicely. And I got the diagram drawn when we were at 91 people, by which time there are 4,091 different lines. So if you want all information to flow from one-to-one communication, it's going to take a very, very long time indeed. So we ran some very accurate science with a team of highly paid scientists and came up with this precise graph, which is that generally, if you're operating like that, as team size grows, happiness goes down. Suddenly, you're getting people having to eat into their evenings and weekends in order to communicate, in order just to share information, or you're getting frustration where a piece of information that you need to know is held in a different time zone. So the solution, turns out humans figured this one out a long time ago, and it's the reason books exist, is to write things down. We had to transform the company from a culture where we all sit around a table and talk to each other, or stand up in a room and make an announcement, to actually writing down, here's how we do things, here's how things work at Ultraleap, here's the user manual for this piece of technology, here's what I'm doing, here's my objectives, here's what we're trying to achieve this month. That made a huge difference, and suddenly these different time zones and the larger number of people are starting to work. But we then had the second pivotal moment here. This is Yurt Lush, a sort of pub in a tent in Bristol near our office where we used to go. And this used to be the Friday gathering point for the whole company every week. And then I still remember the day where we turned up and the owner said, I'm really sorry, but you're too many people now. You need to book in advance. You can't just sort of show up on a Friday night and sort of swamp the pub. And the reason for that is pub tables are designed to be a certain size, it turns out, for very good reason. This is the sort of graduation of humans that you have contact with. So you have about 5 people in your inner circle, 15 in your super family, 50 close friends, 150 casual friends, and up to 500 acquaintances. And Dunbar's number is 150 casual friends, like the number of people you can maintain a casual relationship with. In a company, that number is going to be lower because you do have some people outside the company that you're casual friends with as well, usually. And as we cross that point, it makes us realize, oh my God, are we acquaintances now? Is this what we are? We're no longer a big band of close friends. We're now acquaintances. You kind of get this feeling of everything going gray and suddenly becoming a corporate kind of environment and losing some of that feeling, some of that vibe. And the answer that we discovered eventually is no, we don't have to do that. But the way to solve it is to write your culture down. So in the same way that you would write down instructions of this is how to use this piece of technology that we've made, or this is how this process at the company works, you also really need to write your culture down so that when new people join and they can't be sort of proximal and engaged with the founders, with the early employees in the company, that culture can't just sort of osmose into the wider team. You've got to write it down. One way of writing it down is your values, the company values. These are the Ultraleap values. And for the first 5 years of the company, I'll be honest, I thought values were a set of 4 words that every company wrote on a wall because that's what you're supposed to do. But through this journey, I really learned that the purpose of values is they're kind of rules for how to behave when you're detached from the rest of the company, when you don't have a reference point for what should I do in this situation, to take some of that decision-making down from the management team and enable everybody within the company to behave and act in the same way and take decisions that are kind of the way that the company behaves and maintain that culture and don't turn into the sort of gray set of acquaintances that we have. There we go. That's a super fast run through of 2 pivotal points.
Tom, thank you ever so much. That was absolutely super. And I mean, I absolutely love that you went from pub to California. That feels like it feels like there was more in between there, but that was super. I have a few questions. We've had a few come in on Twitter and various as well. So I'm going to start because I get to. That's my prerogative. But the graph you showed of the team size and the kind of happiness. Do you think there is an actual number that you put to that graph, or do you think it's contextual?
I think it's contextual. I think it depends on. So I think that Dunbar's number is a really important. Maybe that is the crossing point of the line, which maybe it's not 150, but it's sort of 100 to 120 was sort of how it felt at Ultraleap. But I think you bring that happiness score down faster if you have things like people in completely different locations, people in different time zones that increase that pressure of communication.
Sure. So I've got a question here that's come in. Someone's either knows you or has been stalking you on LinkedIn or similar anyway. But the question, which I'll abbreviate here, is essentially that you did a comp sci masters at Bristol, and then in not a lot of time, you've ended up, being a large shareholder, part of a senior management team of an exceptionally large and growing organisation. So the question is essentially, how have you found that transition, and is it what you expected?
I expected is a weird word because yes, and the fact that it's been a bit of a crazy journey. I think realistically, I learn very well when I've got people around me to watch and see how they do things and who are really good. And you can do that both by bringing in great people onto the management team, onto the board, talking to them, learning off them, but also hiring great people into the wider team. I definitely think the rule of always hire people who are smarter than you at the thing that you're hiring them for is a brilliant idea, both because you can learn a lot from them and also because it makes you look good, frankly.
And then another question we've had is looking back over, again, not a lot of time, but is there anything you think you would do drastically differently?
The number one thing, I guess, is kind of what's in this presentation, which is I would start writing things down earlier, because I think when you get to the point of realizing, oh wow, we really need to write this stuff down, but you have several years of company culture and process and how things operate, that's a pretty daunting thing to look at and go, right, where do we start? How do we start sort of writing this Bible of the company? But if you start it early, it's also a good place of like the group all looking at the same thing and being able to read the same words and be on the same page, literally. Building that up together has been a good idea. So if I did it again, I would definitely start writing things down earlier.
So I'm not sure if you saw Cole at the very beginning, but he had his 1981 IMDb diary. So maybe that's what you needed. Your little black book to start with. You start there and work up into the technology. We've got one more question that has come in, which is basically around how you found balancing a growing business with, what semblance of work-life balance you may have. It sounds like you started in the pub. Do you still get back there?
Yeah, still get back there, but also like plenty of time carved out for home and family. It ebbs and flows as ever, and sometimes you realize, oh wait, we've really got this wrong. But if you are one of the people who are starting the company, or you're in the management team, or you have some form of influence over how the company operates, then really, if you have a terrible work-life balance, you've only got yourself to blame. And you have that opportunity, that power to try and set a good example for everybody else to follow. So really trying to encourage people to switch off, making sure that, I always put my Slack status when I go on holiday as I'm not reading Slack or emails, just to sort of like help push that home and try and put it in the rest of the company. And then if everybody else is doing it, you feel much less guilty doing it yourself. So it's kind of a win-win.
Super. Tom, thank you ever so much for joining us this morning. It's been a pleasure hearing from you, and thank you for taking the questions as well. So I will mute you and pop your camera off, and hopefully we should catch up soon. Thanks again, Tom.
Thanks, David.
So, right, where are we up to? We have got two more entrepreneur founders coming up, Andrew Chalmers from SciTab and Elliot Code from Ecology. Andrew is going to be joining us in just a moment, and then we're going to be closing with some words from Margaret Heffernan, the multi-award winning writer, TED speaker, and serial entrepreneur. So we're going to move along now. I hope, by the way, you're all enjoying. Q&A is open if there's anything you want to chuck in there, and I believe the event is being recorded if you want to watch it back a little later. But Andrew, over to you next. I'm going to ask you to unmute and start your video, and you can join us. So without further ado, Andy, I will hand over to you and let you share your screen.
Thanks, Dave. So my name's Andy Chalmers. I'm one of the founders and the CEO of SciTab. And what we do at SciTab is we run a search engine that helps scientists like Ben here in the middle find the right products for their experiments. And we currently list about 5 million of these products that scientists use, and we collect data by text mining from millions of scientific papers. And then we've got a search engine that helps researchers from across the world. So we have researchers from all of the top universities and pharmaceutical companies finding products on SciTab. And this is really key, because if scientists buy the wrong products, then they waste money and they spend billions on these products, but also they waste time, and it means scientific progress slows down. And then the other group that we help are the companies that sell the products to the scientists. So we provide the same data that helps the scientists to these companies. And this is just to show you that there's a lot of them. This is a big neuroscience meeting in Chicago. And we provide data to these companies to help them make the right products for those scientists and to sell them efficiently. And we do that because we want to really accelerate scientific progress. And I just wanted to, as a biologist, wanted to show you one biology picture. This is what your intestine looks like. And this is an experiment looking at the cell at the top there, which is in orange, which is a potential stem cell. So we want to be able to help scientists accelerate their discoveries in cancer research or in neuroscience, and of course at the moment with COVID-19. And so when I was thinking about pivotal moments, I've come up with four, two kind of groups, if you like. So the first pivotal moment goes right back to the history of SciTab back in 1992, 1993, where I had the idea for a search engine, and I was working as an academic at the University of Bath. And the university, with the enterprise team and my department of biology and biochemistry, were really supportive, helped me get money for a prototype, and then supported us through a spin out process, and all the way through really have been super supportive. And so that was definitely a pivotal moment. The next pivotal moment involves these two characters, one of whom you'll certainly recognize. And so as I had this idea for a search engine with absolutely no understanding of web or computer science in any way, I went to talk to a few tech companies and met Dave and Adam from Storm Consultancy. And what happened then really, and the reason it was so pivotal, is that I asked them to build a prototype. But what they really did was that they came on board, and together we built a company. And that was a really key meeting, because Dave brought the commercialization and entrepreneurship experience and the business administration type background, and Adam brought the computer science, and I brought the biology. And I think that's really one of the pivotal things I've learned, is you need that breadth of experience if you're going to grow a company. And then sort of following on from that, we started to hire people. So we're a small team, we provide a high value product. So each team member is really, really crucial. And over here, this is Matt, it was the first person we hired. And then we hired a little bit later, Reese, and then Alicia and Rebecca and Rob. And then most recently, bringing right up to date, Reese B. And I think, again, yeah, as I mentioned, because we're so dependent on all of the work that they do and doing a good job, then every one of those hires is really, to me, a really pivotal moment. And then my last pivotal moment is renewals, and it comes a little bit back to what Chris was talking about earlier, is that you might imagine as a spin out company that the first sale is the big pivotal moment, but actually for us, and it was a pivotal moment, but actually for us, the first renewal, I think, was even more important. And so what happened was, in the first year, we sold some product. We had a very small startup fund, which was great. It kept us really focused. And then at the start of the second year, all those first sales actually all renewed. And then we added on sales for that year. And that was totally pivotal, because it did two things. So firstly, it illustrated that the products, the data that we were providing, it sort of validated that commercial model. The companies had had it for a year. They were getting enough value that they wanted to renew. So it validated that approach. And then secondly, what it did was it commercially, or financially, if you like, it provided a really good basis for us to grow and start to invest and scale those products. And so that first renewal was really exciting. And I think, as a company, it's kind of like hopefully hardwired into what we do, which is that we have to do a good job for our clients and produce really great products, because the industry we're in, we need to do that to keep the renewals. And what's been exciting is this year, and just in the last year or two, is that the companies have been coming to us and wanting to lock us in as collaborators for more than a year. So we've been signing renewals for 2 or 3 years, and also with multiple products. And again, that's really brilliant, because it gives us that foundation to be able to invest in developing those products and growing. And coming right back to the beginning, it means that we can really plan to help those scientists and those companies and succeed and tackle those really challenging scientific problems.
Andy, thank you ever so much. That was a really fantastic canter through. Thanks, obviously, for putting my cheesy face up there. That was I should have known better than to trust you. Listen, Andy, we've got a few questions here, if that's all right, and we've got a few minutes for them. So, I mean, I'd like to ask a question around. Essentially, you did for a number of years juggle both holding a post at the University of Bath. And running, again, a growing company where the headcount was going up, the turnover was going up, investors were keeping an eye on you. I'm just wondering, in terms of the challenge of juggling those two hats before you became full-time on SciTab, maybe you could speak for a minute or so on that.
Yeah, it was it was a really interesting phase, and I think it was possible because the university was really supportive, and so it happened. It really allowed it to happen gradually. So at the beginning, SciTab was very small, and we could test it, and I could keep running my research group alongside that. And then the university allowed me to basically provided support so that I didn't, I could dedicate more time to SciTab, and at the same time that SciTab grew. So it was really that gradual transition that made it possible, I think. If I'd been thrown into where we are now with SciTab and tried to run my research group as it was then, there's no way I would have survived. So I think it was a really great way of trying both the model of SciTab and seeing also whether I enjoyed it. And because I never really meant to start a company, it was finding this solution and really enjoying it, and it's been brilliant. So that's I think it's that gradual transition that made that possible for me.
Super. Andy, just before we go on, can you hit the stop sharing button on your,
Certainly.
so we can see your lovely face? And then we'll move on to the next question. There we go, we've got you back. Super. So one of the things that occurs to me is that given the fact that the product essentially didn't exist before you came up with it, it's inevitable that others from across the globe have kind of spied what you're up to, and competitors do crop up. So how have you found the competitor landscape? Have you found that pivotal in as much as it spurred you on? Has it made you second guess yourself? Maybe talk around that for a moment.
Yeah, that's another really good a good question, because I think when you start off, you kind of hope that, oh, you know, you're going to have free reign and there's not going to be any competitors. But wiser people tell me that actually, if you haven't got any competitors trying to do what you're doing, then you're probably not doing something that interesting, because people are smart and they look for good ideas and they try to follow. And what has been really interesting, I think, is what it does is it makes you reflect on what you're doing and try to look at what you do well and hopefully really try and focus on that. And I think that's our challenge, is to really focus on what we do well. And we've seen competitors come and some try and, you know, directly copy us and normally not do a very good job, and others do work in a related area, so they're perhaps not even competitors, but they're working alongside and adjacent to us. And seeing them and what they do well, yeah, really helps you focus and try to avoid getting sidetracked and really just focus on your core abilities. And I've got no doubt that SciTab is better because of some of those competitors.
Brilliant. Well, the last question then for you, Andy, if that's all right.
Yeah.
We've got a minute or so left. What's next for SciTab? You started off in antibodies. Where are you? You know, I personally know that you're dealing with more reagent types than that now, but what does the future look like?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we started off on one particular product type, which are antibodies that are a real pain for researchers. And a pivotal moment that I didn't mention was building into other reagent types. And now we're starting to deliver images as well as data, and that's, I think, a really pivotal moment. And so I think the future is we've really shown that model works and that combination, and really just growing it so that we can, as I mentioned, broaden out and help as many scientists as we can.
Brilliant. Andy, thank you ever so much for joining us this morning. It has been a pleasure talking to you, and hopefully for some of those listening, SciTab will be somebody new they weren't necessarily aware of. I think that's one of the things I find is that we have a lot of organisations, Bath and Bristol, that are absolutely inspirational, but very few people hear about them. So Andy, I'm going to leave you and turn your camera off, but thank you ever so much for joining us this morning. It's been very kind of you.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks for the invite.
Super. So we have one entrepreneur founder left, and I'm particularly excited to hear from Elliot in a moment, as he is doing something that's very close to my heart. I'm not going to give anything away, so I'll let Elliot come in and do that in a moment. And then we're going to finish off with a few words from Margaret Heffernan, who we actually spoke to earlier this morning, but through the power of technology, she is going to be rejoining us. So we will do that in a moment. But without further ado, I'm going to ask Elliot to unmute himself and start his video, and I will hand the baton over to Elliot. Elliot, good morning. Thank you ever so much for joining. I'm going to turn myself off and leave things to you.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Lovely to be here. Let me share my screen. Is that all good? Excellent. Let me just minimize this a little bit. There we go. Yeah, good stuff. So I'm Elliot Code, and I'm the co-founder and MD of Ecology. And we're a low-cost subscription service to halt climate change. So what we do is we fund climate solutions with lots of very small individual contributions, essentially, to kind of tap into a really incredible opportunity of doing more as an individual in your role in the climate emergency, essentially. And so you see here on the kind of right, there's someone's profile. There's a business that's been with us, and you get to see all the kind of your impact visualized, and you have to kind of grow your own forest mechanic and tap on each of the trees and find out all the data about it and just fall in love with the impact you're making, essentially. So as a subscriber, just going to give you a bit of flavor. Over the year, you support like a litany of projects, but over 50% of the projects are natural climate solutions. So not just restoring climate, but restoring ecosystems too, and biodiversity. We're here for individuals and families, but for businesses too. We really wanted to create something that was really achievable for businesses of any size, for any budget, rather than having to go certified carbon neutral, which is incredibly expensive relative to the amount of money you might have in your business, the scale that you're at the time. So a pivotal moment, we only launched last summer, and so not as many to draw on from the bank as some of the others that we had here, but it's got to be the big one, which was trust and openness and transparency and everything that comes with that, essentially. We really needed to get it right in the world of essentially, when you're trying to solve something as like righteous as climate change and doing the right thing, then there is a lot of skepticism and cynicism and pessimism about what you do, and you essentially start from zero, and you have to work your way up very quickly. Essentially, our customers needed to know more about us, needed to, and it's ultimately harming our growth. And why get it right? Well, it could be a massive key market differentiator, our USP. That's right. Sorry, excuse me. I'm a little under the weather, but the show must go on. I'm sure I can handle the rest of the few more minutes here. So what does trust mean to ecology? So we have this kind of like lofty mission to halt and reverse climate change. And so our organization needs to be this reflection of it. We're surrounded by an industry of opaqueness, like the carbon offset market, very murky, like bit of a black box. And when you're launching, your name is mud. Like I saw a competitor startup the other day, and I was thinking, maybe it looks a little bit shady, but now I was kind of catching myself. I was like, I'm sure they're just doing it for exactly the same reasons that we were when we launched, but it is a funny old kind of world. So we wanted to turn it into a positive, essentially, this thing that's really hampering us, and to kind of whistle stop tour of a few areas that we're kind of building this kind of openness into everything we do. And so we've got this public ledger where we have our kind of key metrics. We have our financials kind of real time plugged in on something called Bear Metrics 2. We have our entire supply chain and all of our receipts and invoices out in the open. Our impact, it seems a bit obvious here, but the kind of climate action we link to us by third parties that verify our impact. Not everyone does this. And then our monthly board meeting minutes are up there for everyone to read through if they're really that interested. Bit of traceability, so on the profile, so when you sign up, like each of the trees is kind of locked in like blockchain elements, where we couldn't just put a tree on your profile without it ultimately affecting how many trees we end up buying. And so it's all linked. There's a proper kind of paper trail. We honor our commitments. So whenever we say we're going to spend 87.5% of your money on climate action, if we find that we've underspent, then we'll issue, rather than lining our own back pockets, we issue out tree dividends to all of our subscribers. So there was 57 trees that everyone got in their profile on their forest the other day. Let's just be completely open. Let's talk about things that haven't worked as well. Be very kind of just like very like show a vulnerableness, essentially. Even our sales team had this kind of big, so open reverse telethon to kind of like to sell in more climate action to businesses the other day, but it was really, really neat. And the reward is that is really apparent in our reviews. It's what people tell other people about, is our kind of openness, and that we've kind of reached this level of trust. And the impact is, well, so to speak, is seen in the climate action that we're funding month to month. We're now really on track to doing maybe like 1 million trees planted every month in the next few months, essentially. And so it's been something super fantastic for us. And when I was doing this, I was thinking about the relevance to, this is maybe a bit niche, this sort of thing that we're doing here, but I really think the rewards are here for every company to benefit from any sector, essentially. You've got an opportunity, like doing this openness and transparency. There's a little bit of kind of, it's not that much hard work. The technology, you don't have to write thousands of lines of code to add to your tech debt. Just put a few pieces of reporting together and have it as one of your killer features potentially. You get really rewarded as the more sensitive or the more you put yourself out there. I find that we've been rewarded at every single step. So I'd really encourage such a thing. So thank you very much.
Super, thank you ever so much, Elliot. I mean, I've obviously been keeping an eye on how you guys have been developing, but every time I hear you speak, and I think the last time I heard you speak was hours before lockdown hit from memory. And even in that time, when we've only exchanged a few emails, the progress that can be seen is phenomenal. I have a few questions. The first one from the team here, actually at Storm, which was, why is now the right time for ecology? Could it have worked 5 years ago? Will it still work in 5 years' time?
No, it couldn't have worked 5 years ago, and it is really difficult. And I wondered myself, would I sign up to my own product even 2 years ago or 3 years ago? Like, oh man, £4.50. I kind of sort of thinking about, maybe not. So the time is definitely right. The time to build it and do a lot of wonky trial and error was last year, and to get everything all lined up is this year, and got the David Attenborough effect and that insane Netflix documentary, which is basically the film of our time. Lots of things lining up, coupled with the ultimate peril that is climate crisis. So yeah, this now. Oh, and then would it work in the future? I think it's going to get easier. It's easier and easier. There's as I say, there's a lot of criticism about just where are these trees? Show me the impact. And I think for example, we're talking to reforestation partners who plant a tree with a GPS location now, and so you can have aerial drone footage, and there wouldn't be much to see from month to month, let's say. But if you had a video feed like that, updated each month, then if you have to see it, it's like, yeah, it's still a tiny tree, but it's there, and you can bring it to life a whole lot easier than you used to be able to just with a PDF.
I completely agree. It's exciting. So another question that's coming from someone who's clearly either knows you or has looked you up, but you were at a company called Twine for a few years for ecology, and before that, Shortlist. So the question is, how do you feel those years before ecology helped prepare you and shape you for the success that you've seen in the relatively short period of time ecology has been running?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is tech, and climate change is a marketing issue, and the internet is everything. And with your tech skills and some marketing abilities, then you stand a real great chance and opportunity to really helping with the cause. And it's that tech stack I brought over from previous places, and all sorts of things. And you don't start from zero, you start with the learnings. And oh yeah, that's mega helpful. And also working in media publisher, being paid by ad revenue in commercial sector, like really made me yearn just to kind of do something for the damn planet as well. So that was a good punt. That was, yeah, chucked me in the right direction on that one.
Amazing. And Elliot, in the last minute or so, maybe leave us on a high. Is there anything you're allowed to share about what's in the near future for ecology? Is there anything big brewing, or is it just the push above 1 million trees a month?
Yeah, 1 million trees would be fantastic. We're about to announce something very important tomorrow for us to get us out of our footprinty, kind of carbon footprinty offsetting kind of sphere. But I'm behest to say just yet. But I think something really fantastic is to be able to kind of your passion projects that you really, as you sign up, if you're really passionate about direct air carbon capture, like big air conditioning units that sucks carbon into the ground, you can sort of get behind it. And like I say, with the drone footage, is, you know, that's just a matter of kind of tech work. We've got the data, just need to add it in. So, oh yeah, loving the roadmap at the moment.
Super. Well, I think that is, if ever, a reason to go and find you on Twitter, Instagram, or wherever to keep an eye on what's happening tomorrow. Go and do so. So, Elliot, thank you ever so much again for joining us this morning. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to go and hide you and meet you, and hopefully we'll catch up soon. So take care.
Thank you very much.
So that brings us to the end of our 4 founder entrepreneurs. I hope you found those exciting. We have got one last special guest who we actually spoke to at 9 o'clock this morning, and I'm going to try something a little bit strange with Zoom. We have recorded the multi-award-winning TED speaking serial entrepreneur Margaret Heffernan, and we are about to try and play her back into this call as a virtual camera. So with any luck, in a moment when I unhide Margaret, you will see her from 9 o'clock this morning. The Q&A is going to be slightly different in that I will appear on Margaret's screen for the Q&A at the end. And for any of you who know Margaret, she's absolutely inspirational. So without further ado, hopefully our team here will have queued Margaret up. She will start slightly paused. So I'm going to ask her to start her video and indeed unmute herself. Now we have Margaret frozen in time from 9 o'clock this morning. So I'm going to turn myself off and we can hear from Margaret.
My name is Margaret Heffernan. And thinking about my pivotal moments, I realized that really almost all of them are about risk-taking. I think the first pivotal moment in my career was when, a few years after university, I'd been kind of dickering around, honestly, doing various jobs within the BBC, starting in very menial jobs, getting to more interesting jobs. But fundamentally, I would say experimenting and trying to figure out what on earth it was I really wanted to do. And at some point I thought, well, I think I'd really like to go to the US and go to business schools. So I put a huge amount of time, effort, and money into applying to all these fancy business schools, going and interviewing at all these fancy business schools, and coming to the completely surprising conclusion for me, in the sense that I hadn't seen it coming, that actually I just didn't want to live in America. And the conclusion of that surprise was, I thought, actually, Margaret, what you need to do now is dig in deep, focus, do what you're doing, and do it really well. Now, at the time, I was working in BBC Radio, and I was incredibly lucky to work with a brilliant, brilliant radio drama and features producer named Piers Plowright. And in many ways, I would say Piers is the most inspiring person I've ever worked with, because he had this view that every program you make, and we made a lot of programs, several a month, everyone has to try something different. And there will be no guarantees about that. Sometimes the thing you try that's new or different for you will turn out to be triumphant, and sometimes it won't. But that's really how you develop your craft. Piers was, by all accounts, one of the great radio drama producers in the UK. He regularly won global prizes for his programs. And every now and then he produced an absolute stinker of a show. Why? Because he was constantly learning, constantly experimenting, and there was always going to be another show, so he could try something else at a different time. And he really taught me, focus, go for excellence. Excellence is about experimentation. And if you fail, just try something different next time. It was a really fantastic experience working with him. I think my second big moment of risk-taking was when I decided to leave television. I'd had a wonderful career in radio. I had a wonderful career in television. I looked around and I saw most of the people around me in senior positions were 10 to 20 years older than I was. Most of them, to be honest, were white men. And I thought, I'm gonna sit here and wait if I want to progress and to learn. And I also thought, you know, pretty honestly, I didn't think I was the greatest ever filmmaker in the history of television. I thought there were people very, very much better than I was. And it was time to learn something new. And I decided to leave television and started running my first company. It was a risk in the sense that I had no real idea whether I had any competence to run a company. Lots of people said I did, but it was a risk. And the reward was that I discovered after 13 years in a major institution where I had had a fantastic time, my great discovery was I loved the freedom of not being in an institution. I remember my first day of work asking my assistant, you know, what is our policy on such and such? And she said, well, it kind of is whatever you say it is. And thinking, wow, this is going to be fun. And it was not plain sailing by any stretch of the imagination. Many, many near-death experiences, some real heartbreaks and failures. But I think, I just loved being in a situation where I felt lots and lots of choices were available to me. Eventually, I moved to the US where I ran tech companies for venture capitalists. I think I can honestly say I've probably never had more fun working so hard in my whole life. It was extraordinary being in at the beginning of the web as a consumer retail popular platform. We invented lots of things people had never seen before. There were no footsteps in the sand. It was absolutely exhilarating. And after my third company, I became utterly, completely burned out. My last company had just launched pretty much after the first tech bust. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out kind of where do we go from here. My investors were very keen that we keep going. Essentially, the company I was running, and this was in the year 2000, was a predecessor of YouTube. And I tried to find someone to buy the company, to integrate it into a traditional media company. The traditional media companies were so traditional, they had no idea what I was doing. And because I came from tech, they thought I was must be a vandal. And I knew that my investors, as enthusiastic as they were, would eventually start asking me to cut back on people, cut back on innovation. And I thought, so my choice really is, if I can't find a media buyer, my choice is, do I accept all of these cuts, which I know are going to be required, or do I stop now? And I decided to stop, to close the business and move on. And I remember having a very bitter fight on this subject with my investor who said, Margaret, I've never known any entrepreneur to argue to shut the business down. To which my reply was, yeah, but you probably had people who would hang on to become what everybody calls the living dead companies, right? Which is they have enough money to stagger on, but they never have enough to become outstanding. I don't want to do that. I don't want to have 3, 4, 5 years of layoffs and retrenchment and reductions in our ambition and in our capabilities. I don't want to keep making promises that I know I'm going to have to break. I would rather stop now. And the consequence of winning that battle, probably the fiercest battle I've ever fought, was that everybody left with their heads held high. All of our business partners left with incredible good feeling. We all had fantastic reputations. And when people went to interview for new jobs and talked about what they'd been doing in our company, they came back kind of aglow. They said, oh my God, I hadn't quite realized how much we'd achieved and how extraordinary it was. And so instead of leaving in a miserable trail of layoffs and cuts, they left with a real sense of achievement and accomplishment. And loads of us are still friends and colleagues to this day. And many, many of my former employees travel around kind of in gangs because they loved working together so much. They've continued to do so ever since. It was a very beautiful and clean exit. And strangely enough, one of the things I'm most proud of, absolutely fighting tooth and nail to do something with integrity instead of just kind of utilitarianism. And I guess finally, the last risk I took was not to run a company again, to see what I could do, how I could work with others and support other people's institutions to help them flourish. It was a risk that I'd hate not being a leader. It was a risk as a writer that I couldn't make a living doing it. It was a risk that not having power would make me feel inadequate or frustrated, instead of which I think I've retrieved my sense of freedom, which is very fundamental to my thinking and to my happiness.
Margaret, thank you ever so much for that. A huge amount to take away there. I mean, I think it's quite unique actually, hearing you talk about how all of the majority of those were based around risk. And it makes me wonder that the majority, I suspect, this morning, obviously we're pre-recording this, so we've got a few to hear, but the majority of those we're going to hear from this morning will probably focus on celebratory moments, first clients or first hire. So I just wonder if you could give me maybe 60 seconds on your thoughts around how celebration is important, but in your context, you perhaps weren't actually celebrating at the moment that you left the BBC, or the moment at which you decided you had to double down and work hard, or at those moments where you had the kind of the near death or the burnout or the impending layoff. So is it something you would actually celebrate in retrospect, that those things have brought you to where you are, perhaps?
Definitely. I mean, a lot of my thinking was propelled by meeting a young woman at a conference who said, where did your confidence come from? And I honestly, at the time, couldn't answer her question, but it really provoked a whole line of thought. And I realized, well, my confidence comes from competence, and my competence comes from taking risks. Celebration, I mean, I definitely celebrate. I love celebrating, achievements. I love celebrating when I've got a new book out. But I'm so future focused. I don't really dwell in that very much. I'm very, very interested in, but what's next? What's the next book? I don't think that's a failure to internalize. I think, I don't know. I tend to think that it's very hard to understand success. And I think I see lots and lots of people fail because they don't understand why they've been successful. Very often they make the cardinal mistake of thinking it was all them, which it almost never is. I think, we make all sorts of attribution errors when it comes to success. So was it me? Was it timing? Was it some particular decision? It's super hard to tell in the time or afterwards. So I'm kind of, I'm never quite sure what it is we're celebrating, except that we survived long enough to do something worthwhile.
Super. Margaret, thank you ever so much. I'm afraid that is all we've got time for in the slot we've got alongside the other speakers this morning, but it's been such a pleasure to have you join us, and huge thanks for fitting in the pre-record for everybody at Bath Digital Festival. But thanks again, and I hope we can talk soon.
Thanks so much, and good luck with the rest of the festival. I'm sure it'll be great.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Well, that was Margaret Heffernan joining us this morning at 9 a.m. to talk through her views, and quite different to some of the speakers we've heard, focusing on her pivotal moments around taking risks. And with that, we are going to wrap up and conclude the event this morning. I hope you've all enjoyed, and I will finish by passing out a few thank yous. First of all, to Cole and to Margaret for bookending 4 of our wonderful entrepreneurs. It was an absolute pleasure to hear from Chris, to hear from Andy, to hear from Elliot, and to hear from Tom this morning. I implore you all to go and follow those respective people and their journeys as they continue. Also to all of the festival supporters, again, without you, we wouldn't be able to have put together such a fantastic festival. And to the festival team. So I know that Becky and the team are upstairs right now in the Storm office, actually, where they're camping for the week running this. And it's a huge well done to those guys, and huge thank you as well for allowing us to join you. Storm are delighted to be supporting the festival for, I think it's the 8th year now in a row, and something we'll continue to do into the future. And finally, thank you to all of those who've attended this morning. I do hope you've enjoyed. I have noticed there is something in the Q&A, so I'm just going to see if I can load that really briefly. Oh, it's a thank you message, which is gratefully received. So in response to your thank you, you're welcome. So Nigel, thank you very much indeed. And yes, to everybody else who's watched. So we will hand the baton back now to Bath Digital Festival. Please go and find other events this week that you're looking forward to and enjoy. But that's everything from us. So take care and enjoy the rest of the festival. Goodbye.